basic stats. I'm having to redo a previous video because my dumbass just assumed that the hit heavy and critical hit stats were the same as every other game, and they are not. So, because I was too lazy to bother and look them up in this game, I'm having to make a whole new video. So, first of all, what is most important to know about builds? Well, that's going to be your stat points. These over here, okay? Now, all 5 of these stat points are very important. Now, the reason for that is strength, dexterity, wisdom, perception, and fortitude all feed in to your base damage. That's this right here, okay? The base damage is the most important stat in the game. That determines how much you can block, how much you can heal, and how much damage you can deal. So that low number there is the least amount that you will ever be able to block, heal, or damage, and the high amount, well, that's the most. Now that is also buffed by heavy attacks, which is double damage, and critical hits, which is your chance of hitting your max damage. So that's why the stats are very important, and you always want to try to balance these stats as much as you can. Now for PvE, fortitude isn't as important as some of the others, especially if you're a damage or a healer. Now tanks, let's just get into the roles first. So for damage dealers, you're going to want to focus mostly on these 3 right here. Now you're going to want to get your strength to 50 because at 30, 40, 50, 60, and 70 points, you get bonuses. Now you can see there, at 50 points, you get heavy attack chance. That's huge. You need that. So at least get 50 into strength, but after that, these are going to be the most important ones, okay? If you, for some reason, can't get at least to the 50 mark in your stats, you're going to want to prioritize these. The heavy attack is going to be your double damage. Now, as helpful as it is, if you can't deal any damage to begin with, not super useful. So as you can see here, Dex is giving you critical hit chance. Now that's what's going to maximize your total damage output, so that's, generally speaking, the most important stat to have, at least for damage dealers. And probably healers as well. Now, a lot of people really sleep on Wisdom, because it doesn't have a direct damage stat buff with it. But it does affect your, so if I take 1 point out, now keep in mind, max mana is going to go down, so we can ignore that, but 1 point will affect your base damage, your max mana, your mana regen, and your cooldown speed. Now, max mana is a little bit less important, but the mana regen and the cooldown speed are. You need cooldown speed so that you can hit faster. And you need mana regen so you don't run out of mana and you can keep casting abilities. So both of those things are going to increase your overall damage. Now for tanks, you're going to want to spec mostly into strength and fortitude. Okay, that's where you get your health and your resistances from. After that, you're going to want to probably spec into either dexterity or wisdom. Probably wisdom, but it really depends on your build. If you're running like a healer tank, like a sword and shield and wand, probably wisdom, but otherwise you'd probably spec into dex more than wisdom. But either way, you'd want them both pretty high. For healers, wisdom is going to be your priority stat. Okay? Wisdom and dex are going to be your 2 main stats as a healer. After that, it's going to be the other ones. Okay? So, but that's for the PvE, and PvP is going to be a little bit different, of course, because, you know, people are speccing into, you know, evasion and things like that, which bosses don't have. Now, so when you're looking for gear, you're going to try to find gear and weapons that have the most possible stat points, okay? The more stat points you get, the better your stats will be. Even if you're sacrificing some stats from the set bonuses or just additional stats. So like, for example, if we come over here and just look at some of my gear, I'll try to find one that has, well, hit chance or something. So if you look, you'll see there's extra things. Like here on my gloves, I have extra attack speed. Here on my chest, I have evasion and mana regen. So some of these stats will have bonuses, like this one right here has bonuses to your hit chance. You're going to look for stuff like this one that has a bonus to your critical hit chance over hit chance for PvE, but hit chance is more important in PvP because that's what determines if you can damage through the evasion. But I'm mostly going to be talking about PvE, so we'll kind of ignore that. But when you're looking for gear, you can, unless the set bonuses are giving you something that's more beneficial than the bonuses you're getting from your stats, you're going to want to go for stats over the extra perks and effects. High stats is always going to be better than most of the stats. Heavy attack and crit are probably the only exceptions to that. And it depends on the amount that you're getting as well. So like I said, down here with this ring, or with my bracelet, for example, 85 critical hit chance when it's fully maxed is not quite as important as, so if I lower this right here, so keep in mind I have 120 already, so when I take 1 point out, it's dropping at 120. So we'll have to just kind of take that out. So if you look at my magical hit, it dropped more than 120. So if I take 1 point out, it drops me to 976. Well, 120 more than 976. Well, 100 obviously would be 1076. Add 20 to that, that's 1096. But I was up at 101. So that was actually that'd be 5 points that I was getting from Dex. Okay, so 1 point into Dex equals roughly 5 points of critical. So when we come back down to my bracelet here, if you see the critical hit chance is 85, well, how many points of stat points do you need to make up for that? Well, as I said, it's about 5. So 5 times, what is it? Trying to do math, I'm not so good at it, but basically 5 times whatever 85 is. 85 divided by 5 is what, like 40 or something? There's 4. I don't remember. I can't do math today. But you're going to have to kind of do a little bit of it, because if the crit hit chance that you're getting from one item is higher than the amount that you're getting from the stats, you might think about speccing into that a little bit more. But it also matters what your base stat is. So if you notice, like if I take all my points out of, say, strength right now, the base stat right there is going to be 41. So that's how many stat points you have without putting the stat points that you get for leveling up. So that's just your gear and your rune synergies, that kind of thing. So you want to try to keep your main stats have a pretty high base stat, so that when you're moving your stat points around, you can keep them as balanced as possible. Because like I said, every single one of these stats increases your base damage, which affects pretty much everything in the game. So just keep in mind when you're looking for gear, weapons, whatever, that you're always trying to optimize your stats as much as possible for whatever build you're running. Okay, and then that also kind of feeds into traits. So things like cooldown speed, attack speed, mana regen, and mana cost efficiency are all going to help no matter what kind of a build, if you're tank, healer, or damage. Because if you're a tank, but you don't have enough magic to cast your taunt and keep the boss focused on you, that's bad. You're not a very good tank. If you're running out of healing all the time because you don't have any magic, that's a bad healer. So it doesn't matter if you're a damage dealer or a healer or a tank, you're going to still want to try to keep those stats as balanced as possible just for that base damage. Because you can have all of the critical hit in the world, but if your base damage is low, you're still going to hit like a wet noodle. You can have all the heavy attack stats in the world, but if your base damage is low, again, you'll hit like a wet noodle. Those things are only modifiers of your base damage. So the base damage is always going to be the priority, and you pretty much only get that from stat points. There are some other ways. I mean, runes and some of the weapon mastery stuff can give you that, but for the most part, it's just the stat points that are giving you that. So it really comes down to, do you want to have the highest base damage you can, or do you want to have better hit, crit, or heavy? Up to you. So that is kind of the basic tutorial for how to make your own build. I hope it was helpful.